I call to order the City Council meeting for November 2nd, 2015. Can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Present.
Councilmember Bruno.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Drosha.
Here.
Councilmember Ferris.
Here.
Councilmember Mulvaney.
Here.
Mayor Waltz.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. With all present, we'll stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation led by Councilmember Bruno.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, we ask that you watch over us tonight as we make decisions affecting the citizens of our community. We especially ask that you look over the men and women in the military serving here and abroad and bring them home safely soon. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilman Bruno. Are there any announcements this evening? Councilmember Ferris.
I have two. For those who are aware, I'm on the tree commission, and trees have leaves, and of course the leaves are falling, and it is time once again for the park cleanup over at Rayner Park, led by the Friends of the Park, and it's from 10 to 1 on this Saturday, of course, weather permitting. And also, because of the leaves in the street, etc., on November 1st until May, there is no parking from 2 to 6 a.m., and it has been advertised in the paper, but I know some people don't get the community news. So that's just a reminder. Stay off the streets, and they'll pick up the leaves. Thank you.
Other announcements? Next item, people from the floor. If there's anybody on the floor that would wish to address the council, please approach the podium and give us your name and address, and we will allow you approximately 3 minutes. Mr. Carmichael.
Good evening. My name is Jack Carmichael, and I live at 519 South Rogers Street in Mason. I'm going to make a brief greeting in German to all my friends and former colleagues in Europe who are now watching over the hearings and proceedings of the Mason City Council. Guten Abend. Eine schöne Grüße aus Mason zu allen Zuschauern hier in Europa und Dankeschön. When I discussed the proposed West Bay well with a retired special agent from the Agency for National Security to which I was attached, he pointed out to me that the stench was unmistakable coming from the oil wells located on both sides of Jewett Road, some miles from Mason. Also, field geologist Sean Lehman confirmed in a private conversation with me that other wells in Ingham County emit sour gas. Is this the legacy for Mason promised to us from West Bay? What about the students at Mason High School who would be nearby and subject daily to these odors? Secondly, Acting Administrator Price emailed me that Ingham County has no separate ordinance governing seismic testing. That is correct, but listen up. Ingham County requires a permit and bonding for all seismic testing under the Public Highways and Private Roads Act 283 of 1909, amended effective March 23, 1999. I asked Acting Administrator Price if the city brought to the attention of West Bay the false permit for seismic testing which I presented to you about a month ago during the seismic testing on Rogers Street. Mr. Price did not respond to this particular issue. I emailed Mayor Waltz that when I told of West Bay's false permit to a retired high official of the Austrian National Oil and Minerals Company, he replied, "Only crooks do it." The mayor did not respond to this particular comment. Another item, at the meeting of October 5th, Mr. Sean Lehman was presented to the council and the citizens of Mason as the supervisor of oil and gas at the Department of Environmental Quality of the state of Michigan. But this was false advertising. Mr. Lehman is a field geologist, several ranks down the administrative ladder. He was speaking not on behalf of the administrator, but on his own recognizance. This was pointed out in my email of October 10th to Mayor Walz, who did not respond to this particular issue. In conclusion, do you want to know who you are? Don't ask. Act. Action will delineate and define you. These are the words of Thomas Jefferson. There is no time left to warn the residents of Mason about the details of the minuscule royalties they would accrue under the proposed West Bay project. This will be covered at the next meeting of the Mason City Council. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Carmichael. In response to Mr. Lehman, it was a verbal typo, if you will, that he was introduced as a supervisor as well as he presented himself to the city as a geologist. He has made his presentation as a geologist, and it's in our minutes that he identified himself as a geologist. As far as what we've been able to ascertain, and we are still continuing to study and review and do our research as it becomes available, but the proposal that you speak of that involves the city of Mason really involves the townships in the state of Michigan more so than it does the city. As of yet, nothing has been proposed within the city for us to take action on. We have a fairly specific set of ordinances in place should that occur, but as of yet it has not. As Mr. Lehman had said, no application has been made at this time. Until such time as it is, and it does involve the city of Mason, it doesn't leave us much to act on other than to do research and to best prepare ourselves in the event that something might. But as a proposal now has been presented and stands to us, it would involve a drilling site outside of the city of Mason, outside of our jurisdiction, in the township, and it would seem that that might be a better place to try to address the authorities at the township level or even the state of Michigan level, as they are the ones who have the jurisdiction in that case. So that's where we stand as of right now, and we will just continue to monitor and watch as best as we can as to what happens next. Is there anybody else from the floor that wishes to address the council? Yes, Roger.
Roger Bauer, 608 East Maple Street. Having just lived through about 4 months of construction on Maple Street, I just wanted to make a few comments. I think the council did a great job in choosing Wright Riley as a contractor for that. As near as I can tell as a layman, they did a great job on both the road and the infrastructure under the road. Their workers were very friendly and helpful. They did their absolute best to provide us with access to our homes as much as possible. They kept a clean and tidy work site, and they were very eager to talk with us, let us know what was going on and, what was next, and they just did an outstanding job, I think. The people from Wolverine also were very helpful, very accommodating to us, and explained everything, and they were just great people to have around. We enjoyed having them around working in front of our house for all that time. However, Eastland Concrete, who did the sidewalks and the curbs, were a mess. They were sloppy. They left trash laying around. They slopped excess concrete all over lawns, landscaping, and existing driveways and sidewalks, which I had to scrape off with a shovel after it dried. Also, there are multiple cracks in the concrete already, and the curb pan right in front of my driveway has a low spot that forms a puddle every time it rains. So I just want to let you know that you did great 2 out of 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Most of that is good news. Attaboys are always welcome at the council meeting. Mr. Price, were you aware of those deficiencies?
No, it was not, and it is one contract. It is Reith Riley's responsibility. They were a subcontractor. Eastland was a subcontractor of Reith Riley. So on these issues of cracks, yeah, I will have somebody. Would you leave me an address? Is it your address where the cracks are?
My house, 608, yes.
Okay. On Maple Street, there are some cracks in the curb?
Yes, in the curb
Okay.
band.
All
And
right.
as I said, low spots with puddles and just, I had scraped stuff off of my driveway and stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you. We will notify Reith Riley of that, and they will have to make, obviously, make Eastland come back and do, if there's cracks. As far as the sloppiness, I will pass that along, definitely.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Yes.
Hello. My name is Christine Carmichael, and I primarily reside at 519 South Rogers Street in Mason. As you might deduce, I'm Jack Carmichael's daughter, and I'm also a fourth-year doctoral candidate in the Department of Forestry at Michigan State University. I hold a Master of Public Affairs and a Master of Science in Environmental Science with a concentration on applied ecology from Indiana University. And I would also like to speak briefly on the West Bay project. I appreciate the Council's effort to better inform citizens of Mason of the seismic testing undertaken by West Bay through an announcement on the city's Facebook page. However, in my opinion, this announcement does not provide a means for citizens to learn more about the activities of this company in the city. In an email correspondence with my father, the mayor of Mason, Mike Waltz, indicated that signing a lease is a private business matter between West Bay and the landowners who wish to negotiate a lease, and to involve the city would overstep our authority and invite liability. While I agree that the decision is a private one, and to sign a lease is a private decision, it's important to remember that the information that citizens currently have to make that decision solely comes from a company who wishes to do business in the city and to make a profit. Please remember that when determining whether to permit any activities on federal land which may significantly impact the environment, including the siting of oil and gas pipelines, the federal government agencies which act as stewards of those lands require an environmental assessment. It is indeed the role of government bodies at any level to collect any relevant information on a project affecting an entire city and to ensure that citizens have the opportunity to discuss all options before making a decision. We ourselves and many others have been approached to sign a lease by West Bay without all of the adequate information from all available sources. As stewards of Mason and all of the characteristics that make it truly an incredible place to call home, I encourage you to organize a community event and dialogue to bring together citizens and provide all the information available from different sources, including the DEQ, to weigh all the various alternatives. I myself hold several certificates and have received special training in facilitating dialogue with diverse stakeholders on natural resource issues such as this. I will provide my business cards and welcome any questions you have about how to facilitate such an event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carmichael.
Actually, I only had two. Sorry, I only had two.
I'll pass this on for you. Are there any other people from the floor that wish to speak to the council? Next item on the agenda is presentations. And this evening we have Mr. Robert Liberty, Director of Urban Sustainability Accelerator Program at Portland State University. Welcome, Mr. Liberty.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council and senior staff. I'm Robert Liberty. I'm the Director of the Urban Sustainability Accelerator at Portland State University. And on a remarkably beautiful November day, I'm lucky to be here in Mason. I first visited your city in June, and I feel I can say this without being disloyal to my own state of Oregon, but any county in Oregon would be very, very lucky to have your city in it. The courthouse square, the wonderful residential areas, this surrounding farmland, is, in a way, epitomizes small-town America, as you know. And there are lots of parts of the United States that have nothing like your city. And I feel like we are lacking in places like Mesa and Oregon. So if you get tired of the winter weather, let us know. We'll do the best to find a nice location for you and a nice mild climate closer to the Pacific. I'm here because I am working with a team of people from your region on issues that I think affect the region but also affect your city. The focus of our work at Urban Sustainability Accelerator is to help urban areas implement their sustainability plans, goals, and programs. And that's a big word. And we include a lot of things by it, though, that contribute to the strength and health of communities, their economy, and their environment. And a key point is that the project is defined by our partners, not by us. We work with them and develop a work plan and work together for a year to implement a pre-existing set of plans, goals, or policies. Your region, which you're an important part, has made an effort over almost 15 years to define what would be a more desirable way to grow in a way that's more compact, that saves money, that saves land, protects community character, and has invested a lot of community outreach in that effort, and maybe beyond the memory of some of you here, but got a ringing endorsement for a different pattern of growth in the Choices for the Future effort, and that was followed up with the urban and rural service management analysis that was done with a lot of partners talking about what would be a cost-effective way for growth in the region. So these are a lot of plans, and the question is how do you turn it into ideas, into actions, things that will benefit you and benefit the region. We have a team working together on this effort, including tonight David Haywood on your staff, Stacy Byers, who works on farmland preservation and is a nearby resident, also Harmony Gamazel, who's here from the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission and took the effort to form the team. Also Janine Sinnott from the Community Health Department, Brent Forsberg from TA Forsberg, County Commissioner Brian McGrain, and City Councilor from Lansing, Judy Brown Clark. And so far today, I think we've recruited several more people to be participants in this effort. So why should you care when your responsibility is here in Mason? Well, one thing is obvious is that you are part of this region. There's strong transportation connections all across the region. People live here, work there, or work here and live in other places. You're part of a regional housing market, and you can be. You need to recognize you're part of the market. What you do will shape where people live and therefore how they travel, and of course regional employment. So Mason, surrounded as is by farmland, of course, is not an island, but part of this regional economy, part of this regional transportation network, part of a regional housing market. And, of course, the farmland that surrounds you is also an important part of your economy as well as defining your community. So this work plan, I think, has a lot that's relevant to you. One of the issues is if you have chosen to grow in a more efficient way, a more compact way, using what you have, conserving what's already been built, how best to do that. Your town square, of course, is remarkable. You've made a lot of strides, I know, in revitalization here. But one of the participants in this effort is Michelle Reeves of Civilis Consulting from Portland. She'll be here in this building at 9 a.m. tomorrow and will be walking around the town center to look at what are the next opportunities to continue the progress you made. Now, Michelle is a pretty remarkable person. She can talk about everything from paint to policy. She can talk to elected officials, to code administrators, to planning staff, to individual building owners. I've watched her talk to a woman who owned a bar that had been closed for 25 years and about how it could be reopened and how it could be part of their community. So we are bringing her here, and with joint funding from your economic development organization in the region at 9 o'clock. This also relates not only to the vitality of your downtown, but of course fiscal health and sustainability of your government operations. And I know that we often ask ourselves, are current and prospective developments really going to pay for themselves? What is your long-term financial health as a city? You're looking at capital improvements and maintenance issues later tonight. Would you like to have a better understanding when you make decisions about whether it will contribute to fiscal stability and health of the long term, or whether you're taking on more obligations than you can fulfill? This is a common issue around the country, and with the shrinking of resources available to government, it's becoming more pressing. I think that people understand whether or not decisions today compromise the ability of your successors to maintain the kind of quality of life in Mason. In this connection, I'll mention someone who I know and is not part of our program yet. His name is Chuck Marone. He's with an organization called Strong Towns USA out of Minnesota. He'll be here on December 10th as part of the Transportation Bonanza, sponsored by the Michigan Association of Planning. Now, I've heard Chuck. I saw him recently in Idaho, and I think he's a very compelling presenter on this very topic, which is, do you understand your commitments and the commitments you're making to maintain the infrastructure you have? And this relates to how we develop, because if you develop at ever lower densities, you have more roads, pipes, sewers, lights, school bus transportation distributed over a bigger area for the same amount of taxpayers. And Chuck has been working on these issues and exploring them and helping people understand the value of the assets they already have, and to think deep and hard about commitments to extend infrastructure and what that will do to your fiscal health. So part of the discussion today was, would something like a taxpayer impact statement be useful for you in making decisions, and would you be interested in working with other people in the region to develop such a tool? Another subject, of course, is cooperation between different parts of the region so that they can all succeed and can all save money on infrastructure and services. And I know when you're proud of your place, then you feel that any discussion like this is going to involve a loss of control. I heard today from more than one source about your very successful fire department and fire service. Why would you want to share that or give that up with anybody? But on the other hand, taxpayers want to make sure you're getting the best value for the dollar. We want to make sure that everyone's being thoughtful in the way that services are provided, and that everyone is not trying to build their own empire. Whether that's true or not, that can be a perception. So on Friday, there's going to be a field trip to Frankenmuth. I think you all know Frankenmuth from Bronner's and fried chicken. But in fact, there's a lot more going on in Frankenmuth. It has a very strong and diversifying economy. It's surprising. It's insurance, agricultural processing, and its housing stock is rising in value. And one of the things I think is contributing to that is they've had a plan that they've executed for 30 years now, which involves an urban growth boundary, an agreement with the surrounding township around the provision of services, so there's not competition, and the conservation of land around Frankenmuth. And that is a recipe for success that I've seen in many parts of the country, where communities that have succeeded, as you have begun to succeed, certainly in Mason, in creating an identity, maintaining some sense of place around it, not sprawling, and that's attracting knowledge and knowledge workers. And that's, I think, very important. That may be more of an issue for other communities in the region than for you. But this tour is a chance to visit Frankenmuth and see it from this different perspective, meet with Charlie Graham, the city administrator who's been there for 30 years, and learn about how it works. Now, that's a smaller community and one township, but it's an interesting example of cooperation in planning and achieving both a vibrant city and the protection of the farmland that produces food and jobs. So if you're interested, it leaves at 9 a.m. from the Meridian Township building this Thursday, I'm sorry. Thank you. I never got caught up my sleep when I came out here, so I'm a little foggy. But that's a little bit about the work we're doing, and we appreciate your staff's interest in this and willingness to participate, and I'd be glad to answer questions, and whatever we can do to make you successful as part of the region, we'd like to contribute.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Liberty? Mr. Haywood, anything from your department? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we move forward, I would make a motion to amend the agenda to include a second presentation regarding the City of Mason's participation in the 2015 E-Cities project.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to add an additional presentation item. It'll be item B on the agenda for the 2015 E-Cities project. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. That takes us to new item 6B, presentation on the 2015 E-Cities project. Mayor Pro Tem.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council colleagues. I will make this very brief considering the rest of our agenda, but I did want to take just a moment to publicly acknowledge that for the third straight year, the City of Mason has participated in the 2015 E-Cities project by the University of Michigan Dearborn, and for the third straight year, the City of Mason has been recognized as a 4-star community. And so tonight, I have a plaque that was given to us by the University of Michigan. So other than the maize and blue on here, I think it's a fine recognition for us to receive. Mr. Haywood represented the city at the luncheon last Thursday and received this plaque on our behalf. And also we received a benchmarking study from the University of Michigan Dearborn, which talks about some of our areas in economic development and promoting an entrepreneurial climate, where we are improving, where we are growing. And I would just note that in the 6 categories upon which we are ranked, we are actually ranked at 5 stars on 3 of those, including clustering, incentives, and policies regarding entrepreneurship and economic growth. And we also have a 4-star ranking on education, and then we have a 3-star ranking on growth and community. And so overall, our ranking for this year was a 4-star. And it is notable that 66 communities participated in the study this year, and 18 communities were recognized as a 5-star community, and 18 communities were also recognized as a 4-star community. We are in good company in the Mid-Michigan area. The only other Mid-Michigan communities that were ranked also received 4 stars, and they were Meridian Township and Delta Charter Township. So, Mr. Mayor, I present to you and the City of Mason our recognition this year as a 4-star city through the E-Cities project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And thank you. Thanks to Mr. Haywood as well for your endeavors on this project and representing our city. Item 7 on the agenda is a consent agenda consisting of the approval of minutes from the regular council meeting of October 5th, 2015, and the special council meeting of October 28th, 2015. Also, the approval of bills from the period of October 19th, 2015 through November 2nd, 2015.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Grosha.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Regular business this evening. First item, A, is a resolution declaring an additional temporary moratorium on the issuance of licenses for primary caregiver operations and dispensaries in the City of Mason. Mr. Price, would you give us a summarization on this issue?
As the council is aware, the Planning Commission has taken upon itself to come up with a basically it's a model ordinance for marijuana dispensaries, and they have been working on this, David, for how long? Well, that brings it in a little bit. I think the last year. Okay, and frankly, my take on it is that until the legislature comes down with a new legislation that speaks directly to this issue, I think we're sort of spinning our wheels, because we don't know what's going to be permissible and what's not going to be permissible. And until the legislature really comes up with some comprehensive laws relative to the dispensing of medical marijuana, I think local governments are going to be behind the eight ball. We are sort of playing ahead of the legislature, which is, I think, to some degree a mistake, because we don't know what they're going to come up with. But by the same token, I guess we can try to protect ourselves by having an ordinance, and although I am confident that it'll be tested immediately if it's a denial. So I just caution the council on that. But I commend the Planning Commission for what they've been doing. I know they've been working hard. We have a lot of legal bills as a result, and that's, I guess, to be honest about it, we have tried to do the right thing, and they're working towards it. And I guess in 90 days, David, I guess that's the time that the council can expect a proposed ordinance. Okay. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer, or David certainly can answer for you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. At this point, I would entertain a motion to introduce the resolution.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Drosha.
I move that we consider the resolution declaring an additional moratorium on the issuance of licenses for primary caregiver operations and dispensaries in the city of Mason as being read.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded to have the resolution declaring an additional temporary moratorium on the issuance of the licenses for primary caregiver operations and dispensaries in the city of Mason considered as being read. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Do you have one to introduce, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I do. City Council resolution declaring an additional temporary moratorium on the issuance of licenses for primary caregiver operations and dispensaries in the city of Mason. Introduced by Ferris, second by Mulvaney.
Is there any discussion on the resolution? Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to acknowledge the work that the Planning Commission and the subcommittee on the medical marijuana ordinance, the work that they have been doing to get us to a workable solution. It's been well documented that the city is not sitting on our hands. We are actively exploring the issue, actively researching what the state is doing and what other communities are doing. And our subcommittee has been meeting very regularly. They held a public information session or a public input session in which members of the community were able to come out and voice their concerns and their ideas. And I would just note that whereas most of the moratoria that we have enacted have been 180 days, this particular resolution calls for 90 days. So I think that recognizes that the committee is just about concluding their work, and we will see a proposed ordinance relatively soon. So I just want to acknowledge the work that has been done. It's a very difficult issue because it is a moving target, but I think that it's well documented that we have been doing some good work on this issue, and we should certainly give the committee enough time to complete their task and do so in a thorough regard. With that, I yield the floor.
Mr. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, I just want to make it clear that I was not disparaging the Planning Commission. I think they're doing great work. They're doing a lot of work. The question is, it could be cut. Their knees could be cut from underneath them when some legislation comes down the pike. That's all the point that I was trying to make. Not in any way was I being critical of the Planning Commission. I just want that for the record.
Appreciate the clarification, Mr. Price. No disparagement was detected from the chair. Any further discussion on the resolution? All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Resolution passes 6-1. Second item of regular business this evening is a motion to consider the 2016 through 2017 Street Capital Maintenance Program as described in the document entitled City of Mason Street Capital Improvement Plan dated October 27, 2015. Mr. Price, I would invite you to share your additional comments on this, as it looks like you put considerable effort into this, preparing this.
Well, I just wanted to make it clear that the council, of course, has final authority in terms of the streets that are going to be that we're going to be providing capital maintenance on for 2016-17. You'll notice that many of the streets for this upcoming year have utilities involved, especially water main. And a lot of this water main has been very problematic because there's been freezing. They have been breaking, and frankly, we don't accept 4-inch water main anywhere in the city of Mason these days. So my goal was to not only do the street, but also at the same time replace the 4-inch sewer with 6-inch sewer, and to obviously bury it deeper than it has been. We have found some of these mains being only 3 foot deep, and as a result, the frost during the winter, it freezes the entire main, and people are without water, or we have advised them that they have to keep on a faucet the entire winter. We don't charge them for that, but it's the only way that we can actually guarantee them a water supply during the winter months. By going ahead and doing these streets with these kinds of problems, underground problems, we're sort of really knocking two birds off with one stone. So that is one of the reasons why we have recommended these particular streets. And the one other that we're saying that needs a sanitary sewer is, again, as I point out, it's very, very old clay, put in the 1930s. They've been breaking, the tile had been breaking, forcing us, of course, to dig in the street, dig it up, fix it, repair it to get it going. And again, this will be not just an improvement to the street, the surface, but certainly correcting an underground deficiency. And I also did provide other information that in 1995, when the city sought and received a $3 million increase from the people of the city of Mason to do capital maintenance as different than a capital improvement program, because in 1974 to about 1995, we did complete all. When I came to Mason in 1973, we had a few miles of dirt roads with no storm sewer, no sidewalk, nothing. Didn't even meet our own subdivision control ordinance requirements. So from 1973, we started putting in storm sewer, curb and gutter, of course surface, any utilities where necessary, as well as sidewalk. And that, for the most part, was completed in 1995. And now, since that time, we have been on a capital maintenance program of doing those streets, repairing mainly the pavement, because in Michigan, the most we can expect, the useful life of a street is 20 years. And when we went to the people to ask for $3 million, that means we're not going to ask or continue special assessments. we would just automatically repair the streets, wouldn't charge them for it. This did not include sidewalk, though, so that was the one exclusion, that we would do your street every 20 years. And as I look now, in the year 2015, we have not met that objective. Now, the council did basically rescind some of that by reducing the millage from 3 mills to 2 mills. But it also put another provision that we wouldn't have to do streets once every, what's the policy? 5 years?
2 out of
2 out of 5 years. I think it defeats what we promised the people in '95, and I felt we did have an obligation to try to meet that. And I'm urging the council from the peanut gallery that I would really like to get back on that, and that, if anything, I'm not asking that a 3rd mill be added at this time, but I'd like to see the council not take advantage of that 2 times in 5 years. That we went to the people, we made a promise. I would really like to deliver on that, and I think the way to do that is to eliminate that particular provision, and so that this money will always be used for streets, nothing else. So now I've given you my 2 cents worth, but I do believe that in my heart we have an obligation. And I don't think we've met it, and I hope that we can get back on that track to be able to meet it in the future. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Price?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Clark.
Mr. Price, what would it take for us to lock in doing business the way that we did?
What we did the first time, Councilmember Clark, if you would recall, you were there, that we took every street in the city of Mason, figured out what it would cost in today's dollars, adding a inflation factor, and that with 3 mills, we could do every one of our streets every 20 years. What we'd have to do now, again, looking at the costs of today, starting with most recent, let's go and say, okay, for the next 15 years, let's forget the last 5. Let's put next 15 years. Here's what we have to do, and here's the kind of money we have to raise to be able to complete that 20-year promise. And we can do that very easily. I can have it, I'm sure it's at a council meeting in December, to give you an idea of what it would take.
What I was getting at, Mr. Price, is I don't recall. My memory is not as sharp as Mr. Bruno's. The request for the waiver 2 out of 5 years that's described in your memo, is that by policy? Is that by statute? Was it part of the charter amendment?
My understanding, even though I believe I vote in all elections, I do not remember that being before me. But I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. I must have missed. It would have to be, because the 3 mills was based on charter. So in order to change that, we would have to amend the charter. Yes, we went back, but I think when you give up a mill, and I think the people trust the city of Mason. What the city has asked for made sense to them, but by the same token, being a local government who is responsible for our infrastructure, everybody sitting here is responsible for it, and I think the responsibility should be ongoing, not just this council, but all future councils, to meet. Again, our streets are going to last 20 years. And when I say 20 years, that doesn't mean there's not going to be potholes along the way. 20 years is the dead end, basically, of useful street life in Mason, is going to be 20 years. I would like to be able to replace and tell people this, that we will replace your street, we will fix your street, we'll be there at least once every 20 years.
Mayor Wallace.
Councilmember Bruno.
Do you want questions if we have about the streets that are on there now or after the motion is approved?
If you need clarification first before a motion, then that would be appropriate to ask them now. But if you're good with where this street spreadsheet is at, then no.
Okay, Pat, my question is really quite simple. I have no objection to anything that is on this list whatsoever. The only question I have about the whole thing is, and I'll give a little bit of background where I'm coming from. As you know, when Okemos Street was redone, that was originally in the 60s built as a 44-foot wide street, which should have never been done. So when we came in and redid Okemos Street, we narrowed it down from the 44-foot to 36 feet, which made perfectly sense. It added cost to the project. I understand all of this. Well, my fault. We should have done this in '95. But when we redid Northbrook, Eugenia, and those streets, we didn't do anything with Northbrook. It still was a 44-foot wide street. And the reason for that was when that subdivision was built in the early 70s, Outlot A, which is that big corner, was originally planned that would be a, quote, little shopping center and everything for that subdivision. So that's why the street was made that wide. I would like to see us consider taking, while we have the opportunity to correct this problem that I say we should have done in '95, and that's my mistake, I guess, is narrow this street back to 36 feet. That gives people, particularly on the east side of the street, an actual parkway in front of their house instead of 1.5 feet between the sidewalk and the curb. And it would add a lot to the overall improvement of the area. But again, I know it's going to cost more because then that's going to involve curb and gutter. And maybe we could do just the one side and narrow it down to a 38-foot street or something. But that's my only, I won't say suggestion, but throw out about what's on the list.
I didn't think about it because Northbrook was submitted to me, and you're absolutely right. I didn't think of that. Yeah, it'll cost us more in one regard, but we're also saving 8 feet of pavement, not have to be done. So we could have a wash there, and I agree with you. 40-foot street there at Northbrook for that little stretch is sort of ridiculous. Even though we have the Franklin Farms and condos there, I'm sure, and what we'll do, we will have the police department set up some, I want to get some traffic counts. Once we get a traffic count there, I agree with you, it should be narrowed. We don't need a 44-foot boulevard there, absolutely. So, yes, that will be, as far as I'm concerned, that will be done. It's going to be reduced to 36 feet.
Other questions? Mr. Price? So what you're asking the council to consider then, just to be clear, is not to start a process that's going to amend the charter on this particular issue, but to approve through a motion that we will not exercise the existing clause in the charter that next year, the 16-17 fiscal year, be considered one of those 2 out of 5 years in any consecutive 5-year period that the street improvements are waived, that we commit to this a year in advance. Okay.
All I want is for the council to approve this list of streets being done for next year. That takes the 2 out of it completely.
Understood.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, have you had a chance to evaluate what your projected budget is for next fiscal year, the 16-17 fiscal year, and what roughly would have been allocated for the street program versus what is presented in this document?
Yes, this is in the right range as far as making sure that we appropriate 4 mills in the next budget, as well as starting the next year's engineering for the next year, so they always overlap a little. So this will definitely fall within the 4 mill appropriation.
Very good. I have no further questions. Are there any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the conversation from Councilmember Bruno and from Mr. Price regarding the Northbrook situation. My question is, in approving this motion tonight, is it the intent that the administration would bring back a separate proposal regarding when and how to reduce the width of that street, or is it the intent that that be included in this motion?
That is the intent. However, before this big project, you're going to have to budget for it. Before the budget, this will be a done deal, so to speak, because we'll have engineering plans for you to approve that. In other words, we are going to have you approve the plans for a 36-foot street, because we're going to have to do some engineering on this. So it'll be taken care of at that time. So we really don't have to go into 36 versus 44. It is going to be a 36 is what I'm saying, and we will then have the council formally approve that when they approve the plan for 36 feet.
Any further questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bruno.
I would move that we approve the 2016-17 capital maintenance program as presented by the administrator in the document dated October 27, 2015.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the 2016-17 street capital maintenance program as described by the administrator in the document entitled Same, dated October 27, 2015. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Third item of regular business this evening is a discussion. We have before you the draft copy of the capital improvement plan for 2015 through 2020. And again, I would invite Mr. Price to offer the introductory comments on this draft.
Okay, the state law requires us to provide, the Planning Commission to provide a capital improvement plan for at least a period of 5 years. And this is meeting the requirement, but I would also like to add that we're having a new administrator probably on board in the next 2 months. And I really think that the CIP should be revisited in, let's say, March of 2016 with the new administrator on board. Because my input is, I'd say it's meaningless because I'm temporary. I'm only going to be here a couple more months. I would really like to have the new administrator get on board, learn something about the city of Mason, at least give him or her a couple months, and then to do this again. I really think it would be more impactful and realistic having the new administrator make his or her comments at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just add some context for this agenda item as well. The Planning Commission has currently received a draft of the capital improvements plan for 2015 through 2020 at our last meeting in October, and the Planning Commission did not take any action at that time. It was given to us for informational purposes. However, I believe it will be on the Planning Commission agenda for this month on next Tuesday. In the interim, I requested that this item be included on our agenda so that the council would be afforded an opportunity to provide feedback to the Planning Commission regarding any of the proposed changes or any additions that we felt should be included. And the goal here was that many of our documents aren't really talking to each other. And so as we look at our goals and objectives, as we look at our yearly budget, as we look at our master plan and even our capital improvements plan, to really start finding some commonalities. And so I wanted to ensure that the capital improvements plan did not just come to the council without us having an opportunity to provide some input. So my goal for tonight was simply to take any comments that my colleagues cared to offer, take those back to the Planning Commission, and ask that body to consider incorporating any changes or suggestions as they see fit. And that was the reason why this was placed on tonight's agenda.
Councilmember Mulvaney.
In my observations of this, there is nothing mentioned concerning any library improvements, but certain library improvements have been discussed and have been mentioned frequently by the Friends of the Library, and those include making the bathrooms accessible and improvements to the basement area so that they have larger rooms for auditorium, small auditorium presentations. And also there has been discussion of using the garage as part of potentially a elevator. So I see nothing in here about that, and I think it should be discerned.
It's on page 5 and 6.
Yeah, do you have a 5 and 6? Maybe you.
Yeah, maybe you didn't get it.
Here, Jim. Take a quick look at that.
Okay. Let me do it. Okay. Then I'm sorry. I'll look this over and it may be spoken to. Okay.
Sure. Is there any other feedback for the Mayor Pro Tem?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Clark.
I'd like to ask the Mayor Pro Tem, how long has the Planning Commission been working on this?
I'll defer to Mr. Haywood to mention any staff time that has gone into this. I would just say that this was first placed on our agenda in October, and we deferred any formal action until November to give all commissioners, especially some of the new commissioners, an opportunity to review the document in full. But I'll defer to Mr. Haywood if he wants to comment on any staff resources and time that have gone into the update.
Sure. Thank you. David Haywood, Zoning and Development Director. We typically ask department heads to provide input 2 to 3 weeks before, about a month before a Planning Commission meeting, before we discuss the issue. And I know that this came up in previous years for when it was given to the council. The council wanted to see this ahead of time, so that's what we're trying to do this year, is obviously make sure that we're all on the same page before we move into the decision-making process.
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate that, and I think it's a great idea. Yeah. My point is that in the limited amount of time that we've had, obviously, as Mr. Mulvaney just proved to all of us, that there are probably a lot of parts in here that we really haven't had the time to get into the nuts and bolts of it. If I marry that thought with Mr. Price's comments, my question is: are we under some kind of a time constraint to where we have to approve this immediately, or is this something that we can take it back and we can study on it? The Planning Commission can have a little bit more time to take a little more comprehensive look at it, and maybe put the two bodies together. And at that time, maybe the new administrator will be here and can be part of that discussion before we go putting our stamp of approval on something that rather than rush it through. I guess that's my question.
Yeah, the Michigan Planning Enabling Act requires that any public facility, structure, et cetera, that's covered by a municipal or a master plan, that an annual report be prepared, and all it requires is annually. So we typically look at the fiscal year on these, so as long as it's updated at any point in a fiscal year, before a full fiscal year lapses, we meet the law. So we have plenty of time in that sense, yeah.
That would be my suggestion, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Drosha.
I'd like to throw out one other suggestion. We always get this, I love the CIP because it's kind of nuts and bolts of, I like to look at it before budget time. But what would be helpful to me is we have the list of improvements we'd like to make. If there any way, they're not in any particular order. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
It'd be nice if we had some sort of, from the department heads or whatever, some sort of prioritization so that when we get to budget, we say, okay, we need to knock this out, knock this out, knock this out, knock this out this year. You know what I'm saying? And then plan on next year we need to knock these things out. And I know things change along the way, but it sure would be nice and helpful to me anyway to have that kind of priority set.
I agree. In the past, it's been difficult for department heads to specifically say we need this thing before this thing because it's out 6 years. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's where the interrelationship between council, planning commission, and the department heads can help flush that out. And maybe this new process of starting here and going there and that kind of thing, we can develop that. But it has been difficult in the past when you're looking out 6 years of project, when you're only going to fund maybe one of them, if that, to say that this thing is in front of that thing, not knowing the full budget and that kind of thing, it gets challenging from that perspective, but certainly not something that we can't work toward.
Well, I'll just take the library as an example. Is it more important to get ADA compliant bathrooms or a new boiler? Right.
And that all depends on the availability of funds in any given year after
right.
everything else has been spoken for. So that's why it's really challenging to put a priority on those things. I know that would be helpful to you and Eric and the city administrator from at funding time, what's a priority. So it is a discussion we need to have to work toward that, though I think it would be helpful.
Any other questions for Mr. Haywood? Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you. Mr. Haywood, do you recall the date? I think it was last fall, or you can just say whether it was the fall or not. But when we last updated the capital improvements plan, I'm just trying to figure out if we did that in the last fiscal year, if we're good for.
Yeah, I think it was
this.
early fall. I typically try to get this through before the budget season. Before the holidays. I typically start it in July and hope it gets done by around now. So
since the fiscal year is July to June, we have plenty of time by that overall that every year we're talking about. That's what I asked David earlier. Mm-hmm. Are we talking fiscal year or are we talking calendar year? And it's his belief that it's fiscal year, so we have until June 30th for 2015-16 to get it in and meet the requirement from the last time we did it.
Yep. Yep. Although that would basically push it out almost a year, which is fine. That's okay.
Or maybe not.
Right.
Mr. Price, I would start by saying that I appreciate your vision of not acting on this in haste to allow the new administrator an opportunity to be a part of this process. It does appear we're on track possibly to have that individual in place this calendar year, but definitely during the fiscal year, which would relieve you of that as well. But with that said, I would encourage us to at least have this in place by the time we enter into the budget season and have the CIP adopted at that time. In reference to Councilmember Drosha's suggestion, the boilerplate language at the beginning of this just simply says it is the intent of this plan that the most needed capital projects are accomplished first and that scarce financial resources are allocated appropriately. That could very likely be determined during a goals and objectives session before the budget session, where we can reference and review the approved capital improvement plan to determine what the most needed projects are and incorporate that into our budget process when that takes place. So if we kind of have this thing falling like dominoes, we do have some time to do this in a comprehensive way and still be meeting the objective of having it adopted by the end of the fiscal year at the end of June. So with that said, while we do have it in front of us tonight, if there is any feedback, let's send it back to the Planning Commission through Mayor Pro Tem Brown, the liaison. And if not, then we could perhaps revisit this at the next council meeting or even maybe 2 council meetings from now to get any final feedback. Does that sound like a plan?
I have one additional question.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Haywood, is there anything that would preclude us from approving it now kind of on our standard timetable, but then taking a second look at the CIP come budget time?
Yeah, the CIP can be revisited and amended at any time. So the one reason why I start shortly after the budget's been adopted is so that we can have it ready for the beginning of the next budget process, which really only gives us, 3 or 4 months, really, before we really start working on the next budget cycle. So one reason why you might want to consider trying to get it through before the first of the year would be so that those projects can be identified for the next budget cycle. But if you miss anything that's new on this list, it can be amended really at any time. Simply a motion by the council to suggest that the Planning Commission amend it to add a specific project. Technically, by state law, any public expenditure and capital improvement can't be performed unless it's been approved as part of the CIP. So that's why I only suggest if there's something new in this document that needs to be done right away, you would want to do it that way. If you want to wait longer, you can approve a specific, amend the old plan and add a project, that kind of thing. So really, it can be amended at any time. I don't know if that answered your question. Or
Yes, I don't want to confuse the council by saying, all I'm saying is that I am not going to provide any input to you because, frankly, I haven't thought enough about it. I've had issues. My 20-hour work week does not permit me to get. However, you can go ahead and adopt it to meet all of our requirements if you want to do that. But keep in mind, I think it should be brought up again in March, because at that time you'll have a new administrator on board who is going to take these kinds of things more seriously than I have been able to do and give you more genuine input. But I also want to say, I've hinted at it before, that before I leave, I would like to have a workshop session with the City Council, at which time I want to go through the general fund, where the city is, where it probably needs to be changed a little bit. I need to talk to you about the pension issue, and thirdly, motor vehicle pool fund. Those are 3 things that I wish to, before leaving, address the council in an informal, give and take, conversational kind of situation before leaving.
Okay. It would seem, though, that we do have a window period available to us, not a very long one, so that we don't hold up the Planning Commission, but do allow the anticipated administrator an opportunity to be a part of this process, that we could do this one time, and it would be perhaps more efficient to do it one time than rush through it and then amend it. And both bodies have to look at it twice. What's the council's pleasure?
I think it makes sense to come back to it. Yeah.
It's just a,
Right, it's just a discussion, so we don't really need a motion. But yeah, let's talk about it next meeting.
okay. Yeah, and again, if there's any feedback, let's at least get what we can to the Planning Commission this evening through the Mayor Pro Tem for their meeting next week, and then we can look at this again at within reasons, our leisure, after we've perhaps studied it more. Thank you, Mr. Haywood. That's the approach we'll take at this point then. And if you have any other feedback too, that we'll be happy to hear it. Unfinished business. Councilmember Drosha.
I have none.
Councilmember Mulvaney.
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
I have none.
Councilmember Ferris.
None.
Councilmember Clark.
None.
Councilmember Bruno.
None.
New business, Councilmember Drosha.
None.
Councilmember Mulvaney.
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, two brief items this evening that I would like to mention. The first is that I would ask the city clerk and administration to provide for our next council meeting an updated board and commission roster, as well as a copy of the board application form, since we're getting to that time of year when the mayor and the council will be making appointments for the coming calendar year. So it would be helpful to know which boards have vacancies or which members are have terms that are expiring. So I would like to see that in our next council packet. And secondly, I just wanted to posit to the council this evening, we are scheduled to have our interviews for city administrator on next Tuesday. I know that process is an all-day process. I was thinking about this, though, on my own, and I would personally like to see at least our deliberations after all of the interviews have concluded, at least having our deliberations available to be broadcast on the city website and on the city cable stream. I know it might be difficult to do that for all the interviews, and of course the public is welcome to come, but I think for the record, since this is a very important decision that we're making and many might not be able to be here in the middle of the day, that it would be a good measure to actually at least have our final deliberations to be streamed on the website and broadcast on our cable network. So I just wanted to see if any other colleagues had comments on that, and if it seems favorable, I'll be happy to make a motion.
Comments?
I talked to Kathy Rinziger about this, and I think she's a little reluctant because I think there is we want the council to be absolutely frank. It's going to go through sometimes controversial debate, and I don't think she wants the council to be overly concerned about how they appear on the TV and be reluctant to ask certain questions. And for that reason, there's another point of view. So it's not, that is up to council. You have every right to do anything you want. But again, in terms of frank discussions, sometimes there is a consideration being made the fact that you are being televised.
I would prefer that we at least consult our consultant for a preference or an official position on that prior to making a motion to change the process that we're already working through. And she is the expert, and I prefer to rely on what exactly like Mr. Price said.
And she can email me, and then I forward this answer.
Yeah, I guess unless there's any other comment on that, just consider it a question for now, and we'll address it if necessary based on the answer. Is that okay with you, Mayor Pro Tem?
It's been recorded. We'll have an audio, no question
about that. So nothing is going to be, but by the same token, we don't want in any way to inhibit frank and honest discussion.
Okay. Other new business?
I have no other new business.
New business, Councilmember Ferris?
None.
Councilmember Clark?
None.
Councilmember Bruno? For correspondence, you have the monthly revenue and expenditure report, quarterly investment report for the period ending on September 30th, a letter from Chief John Stressman, a note from the Morrises, a note from retired Sergeant Ed Hude, and some additional information on Mr. Robert Liberty. And that's all. Liaison reports, Historic District Commission, Councilmember Mulvaney.
We have not had a meeting since the last council session.
Planning Commission, Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Planning Commission last met on Tuesday, October 13th. At that meeting, we were scheduled to reconsider the public hearing and the special use permit for 125 East Kip Road, Andrews Automotive. However, the petitioner withdrew their request, and they understand that at such time that they would like to apply for that permit, that the process will have to start over again. The council, or the Planning Commission, also heard an update from the Medical Marijuana Ordinance Subcommittee. During that report, it was asked that the City Council would consider extending the moratoria, and that is what we had before us tonight under regular business. The final item of our Planning Commission meeting is that a draft of the Capital Improvements Plan was distributed with the intent that it would be on the November agenda. That was also part of our discussion tonight, and I will be sure to take all of our feedback back to the Planning Commission next Tuesday, provided that we are done with our interviews by then.
Traffic Commission, Councilmember Drosha. I know you'll have a brief report because you had to skip out of the last part of it.
Actually, what I would like to do is beg off the report until next meeting so I can find out what happened after I left.
Fair
and
enough.
Then I'll give you a full report at our next meeting.
Very good. Tree Commission, Councilmember Ferris.
Once again, we have your commercial. What to give the person who has everything? How about a tree? You can donate a tree and help replace some of the 200 trees we lost in the ice storm and in years previous. It'll cost you $150 this year because the city is matching your portion. Next year it will be $300. So, as it is usually. So you get a bargain, and you can help out the city, and you can provide clean air for your grandkids, great-grandkids, etc. And the form is online at the city clerk's office. And we've only got 58 of the hopefully 150 trees we were trying to plant this year. So we have a few more to go here. Thank you.
For the month of December, are you offering a Christmas tree?
Good thought.
The DDA meets Wednesday of this week. Are there any council member reports this evening? Hearing none. Next is the administrator report. Mr. Price.
The only thing I wish to say is the fact that the interview process is open to the public. Every citizen of Mason certainly is invited to participate or at least attend and listen to what is happening during these interviews. But it's also, I should also make it clear that the audience, again, it's open to the public. However, we are not allowed to permit anybody from the public to ask any questions of the candidates. So I want that to be known, and we will have it on our monitors announcing that fact for anybody who comes in to view the interview process. But again, they are welcome, but they cannot themselves participate in the interview process. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Clark.
Mr. Price, could you answer the question for me? and I probably should ask Kathy, if you talk to her tomorrow, one of the things I remember that we did before when we went through this is that I think it was the night before the interviews, we had like an open house where we had all the candidates in one room and people from the public could come in and talk to them and ask them those questions. Kind of give the public an opportunity to provide us with feedback if they so desired out in a way more informal setting.
That is going to be extremely difficult to do now. I don't think we can do that. I'm sorry, I never thought of that. But we've already sent out notices. They have to be here 90 minutes in advance for a tour. And to have something like that at this point, I don't think I could pull it on them this late. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. And I didn't remember that. I have to be honest with you. I did not remember that.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, and I'm asking Mr. Price to confirm this, even though the public will not be able to participate in asking our potential candidates questions as the interview process is going on, there will still be a public comment portion at the beginning of our meeting before interviews actually commence. Is that correct?
People from the floor, the agenda item, people from the floor will be read by the mayor at 9 a.m. or shortly thereafter of 9 a.m. on next Tuesday. Yes, there will be one opportunity, and if you can offer it again if you so determine the council approves that. But at least at 9 a.m. after the meeting is brought to order and the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance, we will have people from the floor. Yes.
Are there any questions for Mr. Price on the administrator's report? Then we are adjourned.
Now, before everything goes, now that we're adjourned, I want to know where you want to take it.